future is female. Advice to young women in male-dominated fields.
Hi everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Heather. I am an intern with the Michigan Organization on Adolescent Sexual Health, also known as MOASH, and I'm also a graduate student at the University of Michigan School of Public Health. And we're so excited to invite all of you to be part of this discussion tonight on such an important topic. And this is also being recorded by the library, and MOASH is going to put it on our Facebook page, so if you want to look back at it or share it with your family and friends, that would be great as well. So this panel is part of the MOASH Michigan Youth Girls Say initiative, or My Girls Say. And My Girls Say is a project that's funded by the American Association of University Women and is intended to support, empower, and encourage self-identified girls in grades K through 12 to continue pursuing male-identified subjects like science, math, and technology throughout their lives. And so we hope to create a space where girls can pursue these subjects. They're typically male-dominated. And so now we're going to begin with the panelists giving a brief bio of themselves, and then I will start asking some of the prepared questions that we have.
Hi, I'm Shannon Riedel. I currently am a student at the University of Michigan studying psychology and art and design. So I'm going to be speaking a little bit to the design fields and how those experiences have been.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm a senior at Eastern Michigan. I'm currently double majoring in anthropology and biology. I started as an education major though, so I do have a little experience in a field that's probably more female dominated. But my real passion has been research, particularly microbiology research. So I guess I'll kind of be speaking towards kind of that research area, kind of male-dominated arena.
I'm Claire. I am a second-year medical student here at the University of Michigan, and I've been in and out of the medical field through my mom's work. She's an OB-GYN in town, and then also through my sister who has chronic health conditions. But I'm now entering, hopefully, as future physician in what may be a male-dominated field. It'll just depend on what specialty I end up in.
I'm Michaela. I am a first-year medical student at the University of Michigan, and I have a degree in biochemistry and women's and gender studies. So I can talk a lot about biochemistry and how biochemistry is really male-dominated, but also how medicine, even though there are more women going in, how it's still male-dominated.
I'm Sabina. I am the deputy editor at the Ann Arbor Observer, and I have, I guess, a lot of experience with writing and editing work, as well as academic experience with mainly philosophy and women's and gender studies, so I'm representing the humanities contingent.
I'm Charlotte. I am a software developer at a mortgage company in Pontiac. I graduated from the University of Michigan last year with a degree in computer science, and so I guess I'll represent the technology side of this.
So after we do the list of prepared questions that I have, we're going to open it up to the audience. So if you can think of questions while we're going through this that you'd like to ask our wonderful panelists, that would be great. So the first question that we have is, did you know that this field that you currently work in was male-dominated when you first began to pursue it? If yes, where did this message come from? Were you getting this message from school, from advisors, peers, etc.?
Okay. So before I chose to actually pursue becoming a doctor, I wanted to be a nuclear engineer because I was really interested in like clean energy and making clean energy, but I'm bad at physics. So I chose not to do that. And I ended up not really knowing that medicine was male dominated, but my dad is an internal medicine physician. So I was kind of thinking that like maybe, but I didn't really care because it was like a really cool thing and you got to help people, and that was what I was most interested in. But I didn't really start thinking about medicine in that kind of abstract way about like, is this male dominated or not, until I got to high school when it was either my junior year or my senior year, and my guidance counselor, we were just talking about like, what does your future look like? And so I was like, I'm getting ready to go to college. I need to pick a major that's going to be consistent with medicine because that's what I want to do. And I was like, and I want to, probably have a second major just because I really like the humanities. I was thinking English at the time, but that's not what I ended up pursuing. And I was talking about just doing all these things really, really quickly. And he was just like, well, don't you want a family? And I was like, what are you talking about? I have a family. Like, what? Like, it'll just evaporate when I start medical school. And I realized, though, that, like, there is this perception that, I can't do the things that I want to do because I have to be a mom. I don't know that I don't want to be a parent, but I know that that wasn't something that was on my mind when I was like 16 or 17 years old. So my advisor like kind of really shut down the idea when I was in high school, and I was still kind of like, whatever, I'm going to be a doctor because I'm stubborn and hard-headed. But then I got to college and I was doing really, really well in my classes. I went to go talk to the pre-med advisor because I was like, what do I need to do to get on the same track? And my dad was like, you can come to me. And I was like, yeah, that was 20 years ago. Medical school is different now. But he was just kind of like, you probably won't get in. You need a backup plan. And I was like, I'm doing well in my classes. Like, I have a diverse set of things to do. And I found out later that he was telling like all of the male students who had like really low GPAs and like weren't involved in extracurriculars. He's like, if you just get your grades up, I'm sure you'll get in. And so like finding that out, it was just like women don't do medicine. And fortunately, I'm still stubborn and ended up applying and being admitted to medical school. But I had my fair share of like men in higher up positions telling me that like, this is not a good idea for me.
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a different experience where in all of my art classes and design classes and things that were centered around art and design, it was always primarily female. So all of the art teachers that I had were all female, and I had gone into art and design thinking, most of the women or most of the people in this field are going to be women. I was very under the impression that that was what the case was. But then looking at the reality of the situation, like there are a majority of the people in the design field are actually men. And it's very interesting because it's not really represented in the classroom. So within the classrooms and within college degrees, a majority of the people getting college degrees in art and design are women. But then a majority of the people who end up getting art and design jobs, or primarily graphic design jobs, are men. So to me, that was a little like interesting just to look at like, well, how are they getting these jobs if they don't have the qualifications or if they didn't get the education? So it was interesting to think about how qualified women are still not even getting jobs above underqualified men, perhaps. So that was a really interesting revelation for me, and that was something that I didn't know before I got into the field.
So I guess it's my turn. So when I was in high school, I actually wanted to be an engineer, and then I took calculus, and I was like, nope, this is not for me. But, throughout high school, I was always told, like, engineering's super male-dominated. Like, you're probably going to be one of the only girls in your class, by family, by advisors, by everybody. And then I started college as an education major because I love science, but I also love school. So I was like, well, I'll try teaching. And that was different because it was very, very female-dominated. I mean, I don't think I had a class. Maybe if I had guys in my class, it was like one or two. So it was strange going from that and then changing my major to biology and anthropology, because anthropology is still, it's still very male dominated, even though you do have a lot of females in that subject area. You go to conferences and stuff, and there's a lot of male speakers. It's still, very male heavy. Biology. You do have a lot of females there as well. But once again, when I started in my research lab at Eastern, I was one of 2 girls in the entire lab, and everyone else was a guy, and my mentor was male, and I expected it to be very male-dominated, but I didn't expect for it to be so male-dominated. And when I started at U of M, I did a summer research at U of M this summer, and that was even like crazier because my mentor was a guy, all the other undergraduates I worked with were male. So I did know going into sciences that it was going to be very male dominated, but I think it was really eye-opening when I actually got to experience a lot of these lab positions, especially to see how many of the PIs and professors were guys, and when you go to conferences, how many of the speakers are male, and then it's just, it was a very eye-opening experience to see just how male dominated it is and how hard it is as a woman trying to, be recognized for your work. So,
I think with writing and journalism and editing, people don't think of them as male dominated, and numbers wise, I don't believe they are. I know for sure journalism school is primarily women, and if you take like an English class in your college, it's going to be a lot of women. But they're male dominated in the sense that I think everyone can probably recognize in some way that with writing, male writers get taken a little more seriously. It's often treated as like a hobby if a woman wants to do it. And I think in college, when you read like, the serious writers and the canon and everything else, it's like a lot of men. There's not a lot of women. And in that sense, I've always kind of known that it was male dominated, but it's always been an option to me as like, I haven't ever felt like it's an industry dominated by men numbers wise. But I think it's a message that we get from pretty much all over.
Okay, thank you. So knowing that it was either male dominated or not knowing that it was, how did you feel when you did decide to pursue this career that you're in? Did you feel like a rebel, a hero, both, or neither?
I mean, I personally just like felt it was like the thing I wanted to be doing. Like I wanted to go to medical school. Like I was like, there's no like greater purpose in life than to like heal people. So that's what I'm going to do. Regardless of how hard it is, regardless of whether it's male dominated or not. However, I started noticing that like the numbers of not just women, but like women of color in the field were like really, really low. And that differs by specialty. So, you have a lot of family medicine doctors and a lot of OBGYNs. There's a lot of women and there's a lot of people of color in those fields. But I was just kind of like, I got to do something about this. And so I started getting more involved in advocacy, and I'm starting projects now where I'm just like, we have to get more people of color and more women into these programs because like these are people that people need to be healed by. So I kind of felt like a hero, but also in a way like a rebel because I had lots of opposition along the way, not just like men in power who were like telling me, I think you're too stupid to do this, silly woman, but also like male colleagues who were just like, I don't really think that you can do this. And like I got into medical school and they didn't, so it was ironic. But it's just like things along the path where sometimes I would feel like a rebel because I was actively going against the grain. Other times I felt like a hero because I was reaching back and pulling people with me.
I think it's a great kind of revelation of both looking forward and pulling back. For me, I wouldn't necessarily say I would like define myself as either a hero or a rebel going into medicine. I'm, in the infancy, it feels like, of the medical training because I'm, year 2 out of 4. And there's residency and then maybe fellowship and then you are then you're a baby attending and then you have to like work your way up. So for me, I see the struggle will start to happen more as I get on the wards and as I actually interact with patients and interact with the attendings and the residents and other medical students who, at Michigan, we actually do have a pretty even number of male-female medical students, but as you climb the ranks, it becomes more male-dominated, and as you look at the number of attendings and look at the number of heads of departments and look at the deans and the heads of schools, especially medical schools, you see more of a male dominance, and I'm interested in climbing that ladder, and possibly being a dean one day, or actually influencing a huge system like U of M or other places. So I see wanting to pursue that as more of a rebel, especially like Michaela was saying earlier, when I do know that I want a family and that it's not something that, there's time allotted for in the field of medicine, or when you are going into climbing that ladder to become a dean. But kind of knowing that fact makes me more excited to be that type of rebel, and really makes me excited because I know that other women might feel discouraged by that, and knowing that I can maybe be someone to pave a wider path, like, gives me energy, which hopefully will keep me going for the next 10 years. But yeah.
So I started to pursue more of a hard science field than an education field, mostly because I really love learning and the learning process, and I thought, what better way to learn than in an actual lab doing the actual research, and I fell in love with it. And so I'm like, well, this is what I have to do now. I have to do something where I can do research, something where I can also mentor and teach students. So I was like, PhD, that sounds perfect. But in pursuing the field, I don't know if I felt either as a hero or a rebel. I don't think I would categorize myself as that. Maybe somebody else would. I'm not out there actually saving people's lives or, trying to convince, everybody that this is what they should do, because it's not for everybody. But I definitely think that more women should pursue these fields and try to get into research labs and make their voice heard. And, don't be discouraged because there will be people who won't take your work seriously, won't take your science seriously because you're female, and they won't think that you can do things because you're female. And I just sit there and I just work as hard as I can to prove those people wrong, because I know what I'm capable of, and I really don't care if they think otherwise, basically.
So we've talked a lot about knowing that the field we're going into is male-dominated and how we felt when we started to begin that process. But thinking about where you are now, what is something that you know now that you wish you had known when you started going into this process of pursuing a male-dominated field?
So this was a piece of advice given to me a little bit kind of maybe too late in my career. Not too late, I suppose, but fairly recently, I should say. And a mentor of mine said, it's not about the even ifs, it's about the especially because. It's not about even if you're a woman, you should do this because that'll prove a point, or even if you're the most junior developer on your team, you should be speaking out about these things. It's especially because you're different, especially because you're a woman, especially because you're the most youngest person on your team, most youngest, that you should be doing these things. And so when I was younger, I was always really good at math and science and was like, oh, I should be an engineer. And then everyone's like, oh, but engineers work on cars. And I was like, okay, I hate cars. So then I was like, nah, engineering's not for me. And then after spending 2.5 years trying to pursue something else, I eventually came back to engineering in a different way. And realized that it wasn't even if I don't like cars, I could do this. It was especially because I don't like cars, I can find a way to make my voice heard in the engineering field. So
I love that. I guess one thing I wish I'd known is that marginalization matters. My mother is an attorney and is a very outspoken person, and so I grew up in this household where I was allowed to do and say whatever I want, and I would get told to shut up if I was out of line, but and that's how I learned power dynamics is you need to respect people. But I didn't feel okay, so I'm a black woman going into a white man's world, when I first started considering medicine, and I wish that somebody had told me that, not to discourage me, but to make me aware that there are going to be things that white men say to you that are just kind of gross, and maybe they're well-meaning, but they do need to be told that it's not okay, or there are going to be terrible things that happen to people that look like you, whether whether they're Black or whether they're women, and there may or may not be an appropriate response on the part of higher ups. Like, people may not talk about sexual assault, or they might do it really badly, and that's going to affect you. And so not having any kind of like, I guess, self-awareness about like my social location until I was maybe like 19 or 20 years old really affected me, because it meant that I was having to deal with all of these identities and didn't really know that other people often are unaware because it doesn't affect them, or they flat out just don't care.
I was gonna say, what was I gonna say? I think as women, we're taught from a very early age that it's really important to be modest, and that often translates into shooting down compliments about yourself, or, you know, basically not really believing that you are, you know, as great at something as people say, and that in turn leads to not having a lot of confidence and not going for a lot of opportunities. And that's really the one thing that I wish I'd known from the beginning, was that, you know, in order to get opportunities, it's really important that you actually try for them. I think it's easy for men, or it's easier for men, both to put themselves out there and probably to have some opportunities dropped in their laps. But in either case, you know, I've had so much more success when I just went for things that I didn't think I was going to succeed at, or that I didn't think I deserved. And it's helped to build me up more so that now I can more easily do that again and continue to succeed in my career.
Thank you. Those were all awesome responses, so thank you for sharing that. So now switching gears a little bit to more the day-to-day experiences that you have. Tell us a story or an experience that you've had that illustrates what it's like to work as a woman in a male-dominated field.
So I can speak to that a little bit, not in terms of working, but in terms of going to school. I specifically remember one instance where it was my only male design professor, and one of the projects that we had to create, my friend in the class who was female, we had to take self-portraits of ourselves, and so she had, like, you know, prepared herself however she wanted to look, and then took pictures of herself. And for all of the however many male students there were, my professor didn't really have any comments about their appearance other than like about the lighting or about the actual composition of the photograph. But then for my friend's photograph, he commented about how much makeup she was wearing and the kinds of clothes that she was wearing, and didn't really comment about the artistry or how she had composed the art. And it actually was a great experience, because she immediately after class went up to the professor, told him that that was uncomfortable, that wasn't an acceptable way to speak to a female student, and they were able to learn together. Like, he was able to apologize to her and have the opportunity to make a change for his next class, and I was really proud of my friend for approaching the professor and explaining that that wasn't an okay situation, like changing the situation for other girls who might be in the class in the future. But that just really stood out to me as an experience where it was very apparent that her gender played a role in how her art was perceived.
So, as a researcher, one of my greatest fears as a female researcher is that no one's going to take me seriously in the lab, and no one's going to trust that I'm going to be able to do things in the lab, and no one's going to trust my data or what I've found. And as a colleague put it, I don't want people to see females in research as, you know, Barbie can also do science. So, you know, I have a story for both myself and for a friend of mine. So I have recently gotten engaged. I'm getting married in a little over a year, so that's super exciting. But I just remember for like the first 6 months of me being engaged, I was very hesitant to tell people that I was engaged, especially coworkers, to tell people that I had a fiance. And that wasn't because I wasn't excited about getting married. I'm very excited about getting married. I love the person who I'm marrying. And it was more of, if I tell you that I'm getting married, you're not going to take me seriously. You're not going to think that I'm serious about my career path. You're going to think that, oh, she's just doing this for fun. She's getting married and she's going to have a family and then she's not going to pursue a graduate degree at all, or she's not going to go any further. And so it took a lot for me to say, screw it, I don't care. I'm going to tell people I'm getting married. I'm very excited about this. And I still, my fiance, he can go out and tell people that he's getting married and he gets all the congratulations in the world and people are very excited to him. I tell people who I work with that I'm getting married and I get sideways glances sometimes, very much like, why? You're so young, you're a woman, why are you doing this? You're going to ruin your career, which I think is very strange because I don't think men will get the same reaction. And then at the same time, like I said, I'm very afraid that people aren't going to take me seriously and all the work that I've done seriously. I recently had a friend, she was presenting at a conference, her PI was supposed to introduce her, so she sent her professor, who is a woman, I think that's important to say, her resume. And she has a very impressive resume. She was in the Coast Guard Academy for a few years. She wants to be a doctor. She's done research. She's a president of her sorority. So she sent this long list of accomplishments to this professor. The professor called her and she's like, I want fun facts about you. Like, what's your favorite color? And things like that. And then when she introduced her, it wasn't that, oh yeah, she was in the Coast Guard for 2 years. She led a whole ship by herself and she, helped with body recovery out of the ocean. It was, she sailed all the way down the coast by herself. Her favorite color is pink. And it's like, she has way more accomplishments than that. I mean, she got into this program because she's a very smart and accomplished person, not because her favorite color is pink and she sailed through the Bermuda Triangle. So I think in that, being a woman in the science field, even to other women, it's like very hard to be taken seriously sometimes in the field. So.
Yeah, kind of on that same path, what's the biggest challenge that you faced regarding gender discrimination or just being underrepresented in your field, and how did you work to respond and overcome this?
So I'll start with this question. Thus far, it hasn't felt like there have been a lot of overt ways that gender discrimination has come up, but more of covert ways and the ways that the system works. So one thing that I kind of joke with some of the deans at the med school about is how medical school, even through all the iterations, and even though we're in the 21st century and they've made changes to the curriculum and all these really great things, the basis of medical school and entering the medical field is still based on a system that was developed for bachelor men in their early 20s. And to that point, a fantastic example is if you know anyone who's ever had a surgery, generally speaking, surgeries happen at like 7 a.m. And one of the reasons that they happen that way is because 200 years ago, you had to wake up patients at 5:30 or 4:30 so you could do something called pre-rounding to make sure you knew what they were going into surgery for, so that you could start surgery when the sun came up. And now we have electricity. So there's kind of a lot of things that we've done and made all of these advancements, and yet the foundation of medicine and the foundation of a lot of these different fields is still based on something from 200, 300 years ago or further back. And so there are a lot of systemic ways that this comes up that are very sly. And, one of the ways that I've started to notice and nitpick is that there aren't places in standard curriculums, and there aren't places in standard medical professionals or in other kind of like areas of the STEM field for women to take time if they do want to have families, or for women to sidestep and put a pause on their career and be able to step back right where they left off, because it's still based on a system that was worked around essentially bachelors in their 20s. So I find that one of the hardest things that I'm encountering is those systemic issues. And so many people have grown up in the system and are so used to it that they can't see that it's an issue until I literally, give the example of surgery starting when it does because of needing the sunlight. So I am constantly, I feel blessed and challenged with the ability to see those broad strokes and see where those issues stem from. But I see that, we're getting better with these micro situations and getting better with some of these very, very blatant examples of gender discrimination, and yet we still haven't had a hard look, and we still haven't gone and done the really challenging work to change the system that allows those blatant discriminations to occur.
So basically my story is interesting. So I worked in a lab in undergrad for probably like 2 years. I worked in the same laboratory, and we had a student who came from another state. I won't say which state he came from, just to be nice to him. He came from a different state, and he was doing like a summer research program. And from the moment I met him, I was like, this is not going to go well. Like, this is going to go very badly. And I was like, I don't know. I just feel it. And like 5 times out of 10, I'm wrong with that feeling. So I'm like, I'm going to give him a chance. He's probably okay. Probably like the 3rd or 4th time I had spent any extended like period of time with him alone, he decided to tell me a rape joke. Which I did not find funny. And there was another person there, and both of us just kind of looked at him, and he just like thought this was a hilarious thing. And I said, okay. I went to the professor who's in charge of the lab, who is a woman. And originally what I did is I went to her postdoc, who's a man, and I said, this is really inappropriate. This is technically sexual harassment. He is a walking liability. You need to do something about this because this is a crime. And so the postdoc doesn't really have any power if you're not familiar with lab structures. All the power that they have is given to them by the professor who runs the lab. And so he said, you need to go talk to her about this. So I go to this woman, and she says, I went with another person, with the other person that had been there, and I was like, he told me a rape joke, this is sexual harassment. And she was like, well, we need to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I just kind of looked at her, and I was like, really? And she was like, I've never dealt with sexual harassment, so he could have just made an honest mistake. And this was like last year, like in the wake of like a lot of like really progressive like consent movements, and like he was in college, so he like had some kind of sexual assault training because like that's what colleges do now, like they should. And so nothing happened to him other than the fact that she sent like an email to the program advisor for him, and she said, some things have happened in the lab. I think that you should just go over everyone like professionalism. And I'm like, this is not a professionalism concern. This is like, he sexually harassed me. And like, sure, there are many things that like worse things could have happened, but like he's cultivating an uncomfortable environment for me that's totally inappropriate. And had I said anything like that to him, like I would have been told to leave the lab and never to come back. He is back this year. He was invited to come back again. And that to me is like blatant discrimination. It's that even other women can engage in this where they totally undermine like the severity of a case, and they decide that it's not a big deal. Other things like this happened with him, and she still invited him back to the lab.
Okay, so our next question goes along with what Michaela was talking about a little earlier with intersectionality. So let me read the question, and then we'll hear your responses. So We aren't just women, we are women with race, religion, socioeconomic status, sexual orientations, differing abilities, and other identities. How do these other identities play a role in how women function in male-dominated fields? And do you have any experiences relating to this issue?
I just said something. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I can try to go.
We can switch up.
Switch it up.
I think it's really crucial to recognize that women are not going to have a universal experience with sexism in the workplace or with male-dominated workplaces, specifically because all these other categories exist. And intersectionalism intersectionality has basically taught us that there is no, one way that all women are discriminated against. It's pretty much unique to if you're a woman of color, or even, getting into separate race categories. Women are treated differently depending on what, social perceptions of them are. I think, probably everyone knows that. But I think it's important that women help each other in the workplace rather than falling into those divisive lines. So I guess I haven't had that much experience with this. I'm actually pretty happy with my workplace. I should have said that earlier. But one thing that I did want to emphasize is mental health in general is a tough one for women in the workplace because I think a lot of women push themselves way too hard. And I would encourage women, if they're struggling with their mental health, that it isn't just something to ignore. It's not something to just say, I need to be strong and push past. It's something to get help for. And there's no way that I would have been able to succeed to the degree that I have without having sought help for mental health.
I would love, if you don't mind, I would love to piggyback on that. I included in my written bio, but not when I introduced myself. I actually took a year off of medical school for anxiety and depression, and I don't always see myself or identify as a woman with like mental health conditions or mental health disabilities or. But I think that's a really great point you bring up, and that's something that is more of an invisible disability or invisible identity that a lot of people don't openly talk about. And I definitely saw it in myself and can see it in a lot of other people that it feels like something that is shameful, especially in a high stress environment in like all of these STEM fields, where any kind of like point of weakness can be exploited as a woman, and it feels like, oh, like it's another example of why she shouldn't be here, or why her work is inferior, or a bunch of other things. But I also kind of on another note, as a white woman in the medical field, I mean, there are a lot of my colleagues who are people of color, and I do see them struggling more in the system. And, there's only, it feels like there's only so much I can do in different situations, but I think there is a responsibility that I have to the other women in, the field that I'm going into to stand up for them. And sometimes I find that standing up for them might mean giving myself a backseat to them, because so many people try to talk over other women or, put each other down. And sometimes it's even more important to be silent in those situations to allow other people to tell their story or show how awesome they are and kind of empower themselves in that situation.
I find that I have lots of experiences where I'm just like, do you not like me because I'm a woman or because I'm black or because both? Just tell me and then I can leave the room. But I remember, I was at work and I worked on a college campus for a long time, and I did a lot of work with education around racial injustice. And one project that we were doing was on racial injustice within Greek life, so fraternities and sororities. we had a sorority come to us, and they said, we really want to talk about like how white sororities can be better allies. And so there aren't really white sororities in the United States. There are Panhellenic councils, which most colleges have, and then there are national Panhellenic councils. And national Panhellenic councils were started by historically Black colleges and are often at many locations. However, Panhellenic councils, you'll see that they are predominantly not Black students being part of those councils. So we had just a local sorority come and talk to me and a Black colleague of mine, and we had a white colleague, and both of my colleagues are very interested in promoting racial justice, and so they gave us just a lot of ideas, and I said, that's all great, but we really need to talk about like how white women can engage in violence against like Black men and white women. Like we really need to talk about that, because that's a really huge problem when it comes to sororities and fraternities on campuses, that there's a lot of racism in that, especially within sororities, that white women in sororities are not very likely to interact with Black women, but they're very likely to interact with Black men who choose to come to their parties. And that can sometimes be the extent of their interaction with Black men, which often really fetishizes Black people in their eyes. And I was saying all of this, and I was like, I'm really interested in your ideas, let's tailor this. And I was being very collaborative. The situation got totally blown out of proportion. I later got an email from my boss, who is a Black woman, indicating that like me and like the other Black woman who had been like working with them had like said terrible things to them and shot down all their ideas. And I said to her, I said, I didn't do that. Can we talk more about this? So she and I met, and she said that she went into this meeting, and there was this white girl who was just like cowering and like acting like she was afraid of me. And so I think it's really important to bring up like the fact that many times, because white women cannot exercise masculinity to create dominance over people of color when white women choose to be violent, they use fear, and they pretend that Black people are scary. And so that is something I personally dealt with, and I'm on a mission to just be like, what, if you don't like what I say, and I'm a Black woman, don't say you're scared of me. Just tell me you didn't like what I said, and I can change what I said to you, or we can talk about why you don't like it. But that incident like almost got me fired, and it didn't happen that way. It was that she wanted something to go a different way and chose to be violent towards me by playing the victim when she wasn't.
Okay, thank you for that. So now changing topics just a little bit, we're going to be talking a little bit more about advocacy and how others have played an advocate's role in your life. So the first question is, how can male-identified colleagues be allies in these efforts? And have male-identified colleagues advocated for you, and in what ways?
I guess I'll start. So I guess we just kind of need more support from men, I think, especially when they see that something is wrong, right? Because I think that they can recognize when things are wrong. I think they just choose not to say anything. So I had a friend who was working in a lab over the summer, and her postdoc, her mentor, would constantly yell at her, tell her she wasn't able to do things, didn't trust her to do things, simple math. It was like, you're not smart enough to do that. And I had another friend, also female, in a lab over the summer. Whenever she did something wrong, her postdoc would blame her. Whenever she did something right, he took all the credit. And everyone in the lab was there. Everyone saw that happen, but no one had the guts to say anything. And I think that men need to do a better job when they see someone being harassed, or when they see someone mistreating women. They need to say something about it. Because women, we can say things all we want, but as I think Michaela's story earlier showed us, sometimes we're not always heard. And I think that if there had been more, another guy, maybe a man by your side. Unfortunately, I think that's the case. If there had been someone saying like, hey, this guy is making inappropriate remarks in the lab, you really need to do something about it. I think that her comments would have had more weight. I think that's just the unfortunate world that we live in. I wish it didn't have to be that way, but I think definitely men do need to do a better job of supporting women and supporting other men as well when they're facing sexual harassment and those kind of things in the workplace. So.
Yeah, I have been very, very lucky in that I've had a lot of really fantastic male mentors in my field, and only maybe a handful of female mentors, which I wish there were more, but you take what you can get. And so I really didn't have any like negative experiences there. Every male I had worked with had been someone who like lifted me up and really like helped me grow in a lot of ways, until I had a kind of unfortunate incident with a supervisor where we were going back and forth on ideas, and he always shot down my ideas. And one time a male caught wind of that and was like, "What?" He was like, "He always shoots down all your ideas." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. It's just how it is, so I guess I'll do it his way." He was like, "No, you got to say something." And it was seeing that where he was just a really, really good ally to women, and he would try to encourage me to stand up to him, and not so much being like, well, I'll just go tell him that your way's right, because that's almost less helpful because it doesn't teach me or him how to respect each other, me and the supervisor, that is. And so that was just really a cool experience where I was like, oh, that's a really good ally. He's not only supporting me, but supporting me learning and someone else learning in all of this. And so that's what I want to share about that.
I think one thing that male allies can do other than like supporting women is just to be like, you know what, if they're like men who are in a male dominant area, they can look around, they're like, why aren't there any women here? Like, why didn't we give them a seat at the table? I know that my partner, he works in a lab and it's all men, and he's just like, and he brought up, he was like, why aren't there any girls that are in our lab, to his PI? And he was like, yeah, like the PI was like, yeah, why aren't there any girls in our lab? We need to do something about that. And so I'm just like, yeah, so you need to like make sure that you're like going to classes to promote your lab, to like classes where girls are more likely to be, or like showing that like it's not only men that can come work in this lab, and like making an active effort to give women a seat at the table. So it's definitely supporting people. But I think another part of that is looking around and just being like, you know what, there are no women here, and that needs to be different.
I just want to make one comment after your comment. Yeah, definitely like in academia, when you have all male conferences and like only male speakers, which happens more often than it probably should, those speakers should, make a point, or those people attending the conference should make a point. And I have seen instances where they've said, you know what, I see that this is male dominated. There's no women. I'm dropping out as a speaker. I'm not doing this anymore. And I think we need to see more of that, like Michaela said. So.
And a lot of what the panelists are touching on in terms of female mentors, like not actually supporting them and being mentors, is actually called the Queen Bee phenomenon. And Moash, we just actually released an infographic that explains this. It's on our website, moash.org, if you want to check it out. But basically, most people would think that women would support women, like that would be the natural thing. Or if you think women are not doing that, people think it's because of the stereotype that women are like naturally catty, and like that's also not the case. It's just that women are taught that in order to like break through the glass ceiling and like climb the ladder in their workplace, is that they have to take on these characteristics that are typically more masculine, and that would also mean being competitive with one another because there are fewer spots available in like these higher up positions. So that's a very significant issue, and as you've seen, it's a very pressing issue as well. So check that out on our website. So kind of playing off of that as well, this next question is more about mentorship. And we touched on this a little bit, but we can go in more in depth with it. So have you found any female mentors in your field, and what about male mentors? And do you think that female mentors have the potential to offer something that male mentors cannot in regards to progressing in your field or being promoted?
I think I've only ever had female mentors, and that was like on purpose. Like when I was looking for mentors, I was like, it's got to be a woman. Like for me, it just like, it was not realistic to say that it had to be a woman of color, and it was like totally not realistic for me to be like, I can only have like Black women be my mentors, because they were just like, that was going to be way too few and far between. But I have only ever had like physicians and like other people who have mentored me like be women, because I wanted to ask questions like, if I have a kid, like how is this going to impact my career, and how is it going to impact my marriage if I choose to have a child, and like what kind of partner should I be looking for given like how many hours that you're working, just because like it's awesome that like men don't have to think about that. Like somebody was like, don't you want to have kids? And I was like, no. And they were like, why? And I was like, because I want to be a dad, not a mom. Like, because like as a dad, like you don't have to do things like just with traditional like roles. Dads get to go to work, they get to have careers, they get to bring home money, they get to do what they're passionate about, whereas women have to worry about like, well, if I get pregnant, am I going to get maternity leave? And if I have kids, like should I stop working? Because if I stop working, is that going to save us money on daycare? Or should I keep working and pay for daycare? And how are we going to pay for daycare? And then like, what's going to happen if I tell people I'm married? How is it going to impact my relationship if I choose to work 60 hours a week? Just things that like, men are never trained to think about. And those are things that I was already thinking about when I was thinking about going into medicine. And I was like, you know what, I need to have somebody who's going to be able to answer these questions for me, because I'm going into a field, maybe it's not male dominated, but it assumes that I have a spouse at home. And that in and of itself makes it more like a male career.
So I actually have an experience that kind of contradicts the queen bee effect, which is really awesome. But during this summer, I had 2 internships where they both were for about the same amount of time, give or take a couple of weeks. And one of them, I was working really closely with a male boss, and one of them I was working really closely with a female boss. And they were the like only contacts within the company that I had. They were both graphic design positions. So with my female mentor, female boss, she was throughout the summer was giving me resources, telling me about art and design conventions, things that she had read about, forwarding me to websites where I could get more information about new design tactics and techniques and things like that. And then at the end of the summer, just recently, she was helping me develop my portfolio, develop my LinkedIn profile, helping me design my resume in a way that would engage with potential employers when I'm applying for jobs, and was really like preparing me for whatever I needed in the future when I'm actually applying for a job, which I was really grateful for. And with my male mentor, my male boss, it was a very positive experience still. I'm not bitter about anything that has happened with that internship, but I just noticed there was a stark contrast with the resources that I was given, where he was not volunteering to help me develop any of my portfolio or develop any of my skills. It was more of just giving me work to get done and to succeed at the job, which I was able to do, and I'm grateful that some of those pieces I'm able to end up using and show to employers, like here is something that I'm able to do in this context. But it was just it was really nice to have that juxtaposition of seeing a female mentor who was giving me resources and really dedicating a lot of time to making sure that I was able to succeed after graduation, and then seeing a male mentor who that wasn't a priority, and I really appreciated that someone had made my success a priority.
So more like Charlotte, I think I've had a lot of really great male mentors and a lot of really great female mentors. I think in terms of what female mentors can offer that male mentors can't, I think it's sort of a question of how comfortable you can get with someone. Unfortunately, I'll probably never be as comfortable, like what you were talking about. I'll never quite be as comfortable with having a male mentor as I will a female one. Just because, you worry that you'll say something, like if you say something about something sexist that happened or something else, it's a different dynamic than if you're talking about a female mentor. And so in that sense, I've learned so much from so many people, but what female mentors have really been able to provide me is kind of someone to talk to and to feel, totally open with, as well as someone who's in a position where I can really see them as being in a place where I might get to. Like if you have a female mentor, you can watch what she does and watch how she handles situations, and you can more easily think this is something that I can do. What can I learn from her about how she handles this? Whereas, men operate very differently in the world. And so watching a male mentor do the same things, you might not have the same results if you try and emulate that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So moving on a little bit to finding your own voice. So as a woman who works in a male-dominated field, how do you find and assert your own voice in those spaces? And are you ever hesitant to express ideas, or do you think about how you should present those ideas a little more than you think a man would have to?
Yeah, for me, I think that being hesitant to present ideas was definitely a big fear when I first started. I was very nervous about being maybe the more whiny girl, or like having maybe the more aggressive person if I was trying to be assertive. It was definitely a fear I had, but I kind of joke that the hardest thing that I faced when I first started was how much pink I should put on my desk, and I think that correlates to this idea of sharing your ideas. How much can I make my desk pink and frilly and girly before people will think I'm like a nut? And the answer is as much as you want. But I toyed with it for a long time. I was like, oh no, can't have pictures. Like, what if I put a picture of my boyfriend? Is that bad? And the same thing in meetings. I didn't want to be too girly or too not girly. I didn't want them to call me bro, but I also didn't want to be the princess of the group. And so it's definitely, I feel like I spent a lot of time worrying about that line, and the fact of the matter is it doesn't matter. You have to assert your ideas regardless. You have to stand up for what you believe in, and you have to put as many pink pens on your desk as you want. Just do it. My desk is all rose gold.
I think part of the reason why I like writing so much is that I find it a lot easier to express my ideas, because it does feel like we're equal footing when you're just representing yourself with words on a piece of paper, on a screen. Whereas, here I'm, nervous about my hair, and it's so much easier to think about just what you're saying when you're writing, and that's doubled when you're conscious of being the only woman in the room. I think in terms of how to address it, what works for me is honestly surrounding myself with people who I know will listen to me. And if those people aren't there, thinking about talking to them. If I'm in a room where I'm not comfortable with the people there, I have to pretend as though there are people there supporting me, and who will listen to my ideas. And that's kind of the only way that you can, or that I can make myself loud enough to be heard at those times.
I think
Go ahead.
I think I often just find myself where my number one goal is to be an asset to the group, and after that I can do whatever I want. Yeah. I can say whatever I want. If you know that you need me, if my ideas are the core thing that you have, and so if you lose me, that's really bad for you. So I'm going to behave how I want. I've learned to be nicer, but I think that that's a great way to assert your own voice, is to front load at the end. I am very intelligent and I am an asset to this group, and so you have to listen to me. Or if I feel like I'm not listened to, I'll just go somewhere else where my ideas are valued.
So I'm actually a very passive person, just who I am. I'm not very assertive. I'm very scared of presenting ideas in a group. I'm when I first joined labs, I was terrified that I was going to do something wrong, even when no one was there, and they were going to figure it out. And so for me, what has helped me grow as a person has actually been my mentors. And in the sciences, I've had mostly male mentors. I think I've had one female mentor, and my mentor has been the greatest person for helping me find my voice in the lab and find my voice in an academic setting. He's constantly asking me to do things for him. He wants me to write a paper for him. He's constantly telling me, you go ahead and create the experiment, you do this, and come back to me. And I think that's really helped me grow as a person, but also helped me find confidence in myself, because whereas before I would have been afraid to present ideas or anything, especially in a male-dominated setting, but any group setting to begin with, is now hey, you have to listen to me, because what I've created is mine, and you don't have any, you have no knowledge of this outside of what I can tell you. So Definitely finding your own confidence, but then finding someone who could help you grow as a person is very important in navigating the STEM field, I think.
I was going to add, doing things like this is also very helpful. I don't know if you guys are all as afraid of public speaking as I am, but being in an environment where you're here to talk about these things and where you know the people around you can understand, and just practicing literally talking to a room full of people is really, really helpful.
All right, well, thank you all for participating, and if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, I'm sure that the panelists are willing to answer your question afterwards if you want to approach them. Maybe get their email address if they're willing to do that, so you can follow up with them later. But that's about it. Thank you all for attending, and we'll have this on Facebook for you to reference later.
This program was recorded on August 16th, 2018 at the Ann Arbor District Library.